Welcome to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. This program is dedicated to featuring authors and experts from around the world who will share their knowledge and insight with you, the viewing and listening audience. Literacy and education are the keys to freedom, and diversity enables one to live in a world with broader perspectives. This is Donna Sebo, and I will be your host for the next hour. Welcome to Special Editions, the Donna Sebo Show. I'm so delighted you're able to join us. Today we've got a topic, Faces of Leadership. I have two guests with me, but before I begin to introduce them, I want to make a comment. It has come to my attention, because of conversations that I have with people from around the world on my daily programming, that leadership is really a conundrum. There are so many people, no matter where you are in the world, that say, where are the leaders? Do we have any good leaders? And my response is, yes. But what makes a leader? What is it that creates that special something that people want to be a part of as a follower, or maybe want to have that person as a mentor for them? How is it that we can understand that leaders really can be made? Yes, there are some people that are born with certain personality traits, but leadership? We've had a lot of demonstrations, not just here in the United States, but in other countries throughout the world. We've seen demonstrations in businesses that have not been positive demonstrations, and we wonder, do people have integrity today? Are they really interested in representing the finest and the best that they possibly can give? Well, my two guests, Bart Barthelemy, he is in Ohio, and he's with us on Zoom. And then I have William, he likes to be called Bill, Merck II. And both of these gentlemen have written publications, and in this program, as with all of my programs, I feature authors. And the reason I do this is because it's not enough just to talk about things, but it's important to be able to read. And when you read, you have a chance to be able to see perspectives that otherwise you may not ever even consider. So we are going to join them. Bart and Bill, I want to welcome you to the show. It's a delight having both of you.
Delighted to be here. This is great.
You know, I'm virtual.
Aha, there we go. Technology is wonderful because it enables us to communicate in a way and manner today that wasn't possible. I've been in media for so many years, and you know, it's one thing to talk on the phone, but to be able to meet both of you gentlemen in person, it is really exciting. Leadership, both of you have been very dedicated, and what I want to do, I want to share the titles of the books, and the books are here on the table in front of me. Now, Bill, we have two of your books, and that is So You Want to Be a Leader, and then your other book is Breadcrumbs.
Finding a Philosophy of Life.
Finding a Philosophy of Life. And then Bart, your book is Collaborative Innovation. Now, both of you come from your unique perspectives, and so this is what we're going to be discussing in this program. What is it that makes a leader? So, Bill, I want to come to you first. If someone came to you and asked you that question, what is a leader? What makes a leader? You know, there's so many aspects to being a leader. Yeah. How would you respond?
Well, there's multiple ways to respond to that question. First thing I would say is the simple definition of a leader is someone who sets the direction and engages others to follow. And another way of saying that is a person that sets a direction and inspires others to follow. That's a definition I would use of a leader. But developing a leader, is some people would say leaders are born, not made. That's untrue. I don't believe that for a second. In fact, you've said it before. People are born with certain personality traits that make people think they're a leader, but they haven't really had the experience to make them a true leader. Experience is the greatest teacher. If you're introspective, if you think about what that experience has taught you and you learn from it, and those things help you to become a really good leader.
One of the things I wanted to make those of you watching the program be aware of is that Bill teaches a master class on leadership, and it's about principles, and I mentioned one of those principles, integrity. But there's so much more than that, and we're going to be finding out about that. Bart, I want to go to you and ask you, if someone came to you and asked you, what is a leader?
Well, I think a leader is someone who takes people to places or visions that they don't think they can get to, but they would love to get to. And I think that really interacts the leadership with the followership. It's one thing to tell people, let's go here or there, but I think in order to be a leader, obviously, you need followers. And if you need followers, the followers have to believe that you're going to lead them to something interesting. If it's just the same old place, they're not going to be very interested. But if you go, gee, we all don't think we can get there to a place where you don't think you can get there, and we're going to get there. And it'll be wonderful when we get there. And I've been in the military all my life, and so that is exactly what excites the military folks to take chances, to take risks, because they really do want to get there, but they don't know how to get there, and they really are looking for a leader. So I think you fill that gap.
Mm-hmm. And Bart, you are the national director, or have been the national director of the National Aerospace Program. You are the founding director of Wright Brothers Institute, and you can see it on your shirt. You've got your emblem there on the shirt. So that is very visible. But when I'm looking at this, and when I'm observing your various background, you were also with as I said, the director of the National Aerospace Program. You reported to the White House. You were responsible for development of nation's hypersonic aerospace planes. You've been in physics. You've been in engineering, nuclear engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering. Your background is amazing. I mean, you've got all of this diversity. And the Wright Brothers Institute, I'd never heard of it before I got your book. I didn't even know it existed. I've never been even to Ohio, so I don't know what's in Ohio, to be perfectly frank. So here I am, and I read your book, and I'm amazed, because this started when? In 2002? What started the Institute?
Exactly right. It started in 2002, and we wanted to take particularly the Air Force, because one thing about Dayton, Ohio that people might remember is that the Wright brothers came from Dayton, Ohio. And so they were here, they built the first airplane. They took people to places that they really wanted to go, but didn't know how to get there. And so all these years, that was in 1903, by the way, but all these years later, which is more than a century, we got permission to use the Wright brothers, from the descendants of the Wright brothers, as our logo, as our main focus. And it's really to take everybody, but particularly the United States Air Force and the United States as a country, to places that they really want to go. And I can't think of a better example of leadership, even though they would never call themselves that, were the Wright brothers, who took the chances, who put their lives and their fortunes on the line. And they did it in a collaborative way, and a lot of people think it was very innovative, and it certainly was. But that's why we're in Dayton. That's why we have the name that we're very proud of the Wright brothers. And our whole business is to do just that, to go beyond what people believe they could get, space-wise, Air Force-wise, and even economically.
Your two words, collaborative innovation, really resonate with me. And the reason that they do, I had the privilege of interviewing a gentleman who did a book on the history of America during the period of FDR, before, during, and after the Second World War. And it was the cooperative interaction of the military along with the civilian industrial section. And to be made aware of that collaborative aspect is very important. And the people that were a part of it, they were all leaders in their field. And they were in different fields, everything from making steel pipes to parachutes to planes, you name it. All of the top people in the country came together, not without some discord, and that involved different aspects of leadership. And Bill, one of the things in your book, So You Want to Be a Leader, in that book, you basically, because of your corporate environment. Give us a little bit of your background for your corporate experience. You yourself were in the military. You were an officer, so you were given that kind of training. And military training, in my observation, is absolutely amazing because there are so many different components that you're supposed to learn if you are going to be an officer. So you brought that into the civilian environment, which can be a challenge in many instances. Give us a little bit of information about how you adapted and as becoming, quote unquote, a leader in your right, of being a CEO or being in a positioning of giving orders to other people. How did that all come about for you?
Well, I think I would start with some of the experiences before the military where I had an opportunity to be a supervisor or a leader in some different areas. I worked for a bank for a while. I worked for the State Highway Department in Georgia, worked my way up to a supervisory role. Those were some good background pieces, but really when I went into military and went through basic training, advanced individual training, and then officers candidate school, a lot of those things really came together for me and helped me understand what being a leader was really all about. And two things I'll just mention out of many. One of them was, one of the things I learned is how important teamwork is. We were told right off the bat is when we were going into officer candidate school, for an example, that there was a colonel that came to us the first night and said, look, he said a lot of things, but then he said, you will not get through this program alone. You will have to work with the other candidates and collaborate and work as a team if you're going to graduate from this program. Flying solo, you will fail. And that really stuck with me, and it was so true. Then I think another aspect of leadership is plan A always goes south. You need a plan A to start.
Absolutely.
But it's not always going to work out for you. And so you need to think about what comes next. And then the military really puts you in positions where you go into a situation with a plan, it starts to fall apart, so you're expected to think on your feet, to figure out how to adapt to it, and to achieve the objective. And so those things are really important in the corporate world as well.
Big time. Big time. Just look at what we've gone through with the COVID and how adaptation, because we really haven't had that kind of a severe upset for a long time. And for the generations of today, the younger generations, the adaptation wasn't easy. I mean, they've done stats. They said the younger generation was more depressed than the older generation, but the older generation has already gone through a lot of this stuff. So you have all of this that occurs. Bart, with the Institute, I was fascinated when I was reading your material, and you had different programs that you started. And one of those programs, let's see, there was one, is it TAC? I think a TAC. What is that?
Well, I don't know which one that particular one is, but the main purpose of our institute is innovations. And so, again, I think most leaders are expected to be innovative, or at least to instill innovation in their people that are following them. And I've practiced this all my life, 60 years in both the military and the civilian world, and there's nothing better than collaboration to get to innovation. And the reason for that is that any two people will come up with a third idea if we get them to talk about it for a while. So if you have a problem, or if you want to move the company or the organization or the military to a particular point, you've got one brain, and that'll help, and then another person has another one. But really what happens is that the combination of those two, or more, we've had groups of 10, that we call it divergent collaboration, and it's not like it diverges, but there are diversified people in it. That produces innovation that is so superior than anything that one individual can come up with, because after all, you only know what you know. So the idea of collaboration is to understand other perspectives, weave them in, and take advantage of that to come up with something very creative. So that's one of the main approaches that the Wright Brothers Institute follows.
I was very impressed by something that you use as a tool. And I learned about this from a group of grandmothers, believe it or not. And this is a number of years ago. And that's called the talking stick. And that talking stick, I was reading that in your book, and I thought if more business meetings could have a talking stick, we would be so much better off. It's great around the family table, in fact. It's just wonderful. Let's go into that talking stick, because I don't know that my audience maybe is aware of that unless they have some kind of a Native American background. What is a talking stick, and how did you find to utilize it in the meetings?
Right. Actually, it's ancient, and it actually applies to any tribe that has begun sort of moving towards civilization. So Native Americans certainly have used the talking stick, but one of my friends actually spent 6 months for 10 years in different basic tribes in Australia, Alaska, and he says all of them have a talking stick. And of course, the stick doesn't talk. The stick is simply a method to get to collaborative innovation. I didn't realize that, and I'm sure when using it, no one comes up with the words collaborative innovation, but it works because there's only 2 rules. One is you pass the stick to another person after you've stopped talking, but while you're talking, they all listen, and then they talk and you listen. And it is something that all ancient tribes use, and it should be used today. I'll give you a wonderful example. When Norm Augustine, who was the head of Lockheed, decided that there were too many companies in the aerospace world, he brought the CEOs of 10 aerospace companies together. They passed the talking stick, and after a couple of days, they had finally agreed to forming only 3 by cooperating and collaborating with each other. And those are the 3 that exist today. And it would have been a struggle to do it without honest talking. That you have to be honest using the talking stick, and I'm sure the ancient leaders wanted that to happen as well. But today, and when I say honest, I don't mean no one lies, but they have to really tell it like it is, tell it from the heart. And so I've used the talking stick for the last 30 years with very high-level people as well as just ordinary people to get through to a collaborative innovation solution that they probably would have never gotten to if they hadn't used. It's simply a stick, but it's a device that forces you to be collaborative.
Well, it encourages civil discourse, doesn't it? So that people will actually listen to what's going on. Now, Bill, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because you've been in corporate environments and you've worked with so many different people and in so many different scenarios, meetings, I can't tell you how many times people either I've been interacting with that they say, we're going to have a meeting, and I go, oh, no, okay, how long is that going to be? All right, let me think. I have to adjust, depending on what positioning I was in. And so often, meetings are absolutely a waste of time. Now, someone that's in charge of meetings, that is in a position, they're in a position of leadership. I mean, they're the ones that are setting it up. They're the ones that put out all the information. That's not always something that's easy to go through because so often there isn't a talking stick.
Right. No.
So what would you say about leadership when you're going to do a meeting? Because let's face it, business is business. You're dealing with human beings. There is not anything in this world that we interact with where we're not going to be dealing with human beings. So how can we work with meetings so that they are going to be effective if we are that person that's doing that presentation?
I'll start with, it seems like by default, people will set up a meeting for an hour. If you need 15 minutes or a half an hour, it's always an hour. And humans seem to have a need to fill that hour with something, some talk. So you can get to the point of the meeting, resolve what it is, people look at their watch and they see there's 15 more minutes, and so they want to talk about something, and they kill the rest of the time, and everybody's not happy about that. So what I think is a wise move is if you think your topic is going to take, say, an hour, if it's going to take an hour, set the meeting for 45 minutes or even 30 minutes. That almost forces people to get to the point more quickly and not beat around the bush when they know there's a time limit on how long they're going to have to get there. And that really helps. And as a leader, I didn't have the talking stick that Bart had, but so I guess I was it. I didn't mind if people got into back and forth with each other and that sort of thing, but I always felt like it was my role if it started to get out of hand or if it started to get a little bit too confrontational to back them off and deal with it. So I was sort of the person that kept order in the meeting, but I wanted people to talk to each other, and I didn't mind them getting a little heated up every now and then, because sometimes that would spark some thoughts. And also, well, I'm straying, if you don't mind, just for a second from the meeting, but when we're talking about pulling people together in diversity, these meetings are, it's a little bit of a tie there. In your organization, you really want diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of even age groups, because they come from a little different culture, that sort of thing, and they all have a different input to go into solving a problem. So I always really like to have no clones of myself. I've already got that one. And if you're running a finance operation, for an example, and you have all of the accountants that you need to take care of the numbers, you need some other people in the meeting too that can look at the bigger picture. Where's all this taking us? What are we really trying to achieve? And have some of those questions come out in addition to just the factual things. So anyway, meetings are, I think they're actually fun in a sense if you don't let them drag on to the point that people are fidgety, ready to leave, and those will kill a good outcome.
And I know, Bill, you give a number of tips to anyone with your book, So You Want to Be a Leader, and it doesn't make any difference. The thing is, when somebody goes into business, for example, or they are put into a positioning of responsibility where they have people under them, that is a shift in mindset. And one of the things that I noticed, and I was a teenager when I noticed this, I was working for a very, very large company, and a woman had been promoted to a positioning of being a supervisor, where she had been in a positioning where there was nowhere near that type of responsibility. And I'll never forget how she, and I loved her, she was a wonderful person, but how she, and I've seen this with men too, how she had this different posture. She had gone through the training that she was supposed to have as a supervisor, but the training didn't include the transition of, don't forget you're dealing with people. You are dealing with people. They have their concerns every day. You can be a supervisor and you don't want to be in their business. That's not what you want to do.
Personal business.
But you want to have that sense of empathy. And I think sometimes when you're assigned a new position, you know, as a mature woman today, I think about her every once in a while and I go, you know, you probably were scared to death because you're in a positioning where you're over 200 people, or at least 200 people are under her, and you just don't know. Maybe you don't have a good mentor. You don't have someone that is going to say, relax, take it easy. If you have any questions, come and talk to me, and I'll assist you. So often people are thrown into positionings of leadership that truthfully they are nowhere near qualified for, and they don't even have the experience for that. And I think that when you can share that kind of knowledge and understanding with someone and say, all right, be aware this could happen to you. This happened to you. You were thrown into a situation that you didn't have any experience.
That's right.
And so,
That's
I don't
right.
know, was the fake it until you make it adage appropriate
No,
for
no,
that?
I never tried to fake it. I've heard that expression many times, and I cringe a little bit because, be honest, don't try to fake it.
Don't try to fake it, just there you go.
And learn all you can as fast as you can. But I've been in those positions where I was put in a supervisory role that I was not quite ready for, but I had to adapt. I had to learn how to do it, and I did. I learned from it and made things work. One of my experiences with that was one of my first job actually out of the military was at a college, became James Madison University later, but I was hired as a housing director. I had no idea what a housing director did, but here it is. You're now the director. So I had to figure it out, and I had to figure it out in a hurry. The good thing was what I inherited was not being run very well. So there's a lot of upside to the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So when I jumped in and I was excited about it, I saw some opportunities to improve things, and I just did them. And that's another thing that I think is important for a leader, is to be able to be comfortable taking the initiative to do things, to go, really sometimes to go out on a limb, to make things happen that you think are the right things to do. and not worry so much about, am I going to get fired over this? Because you probably will get fired if you don't do certain things. So, but being promoted is similar. You go into a new job, that's one thing. You've got to start and build your credibility with the people that you're leading, because they don't really know you. They might have seen your resume or something, but they don't know you. They don't know how they're going to interact. They don't know how they're going to get along with you. So there's some anxiety there. You have to work your way through that, get to know your people, understand what their hopes, dreams, desires are. What are their career aspirations? Can you help them? And you can start to build a team. You have to be careful. First impressions can be misleading because everybody wants to impress the new boss.
Absolutely.
So they're going to try to say and do whatever looks good. So don't jump to a conclusion, but get to know these people over a period of time, and then you can start to see who the stars are and who the ones are that maybe need to be culled out of the crowd. But you often don't get that right up front. But you build credibility. Okay, so one thing that people think is that respect comes with your title, if you're promoted or if you're hired, and that's the farthest thing from the truth.
Not true.
They might respect the title a little bit, but they don't know you. Now, like I said, they've maybe been in your presence in a couple of interviews and maybe seen your resume. Okay, that's all good. That got you the job. Now, what are you going to do? How is that going to affect me, the person reporting to you? What's in it for me? How is this going to all work out? So it takes time to build that credibility. It really does. And sometimes your credibility is built through crisis management. In the organization, sometimes life will be good for a period of time, and then suddenly some catastrophe hits. And as the leader, you've got to deal with that catastrophe. And how you deal with it is really being watched by everybody. And if you're successful in dealing with it, you kept your composure, you brought people in, and you got the situation resolved, that goes a long way to establishing your credibility with the people that you're leading. And so sometimes you can establish credibility fairly quickly. Other times it takes a little bit longer, depending on what happens in the organization that you're responsible for.
Bart, when with your organization, you have so many different parts to it. You have so many different aspects, and you do trainings as well. But what I was fascinated with is how you actually, when it comes to planning, for example, you're working on a project, if you're working on a project with the Air Force, let's use that as an example. You are working with them, you have multiple people, you have multiple egos. The talking stick is very, very handy. But you've got to be able to work with the present as well as maybe looking forward to not just what the objective is, but what is going to be the overall long-term effect of that objective. And you're dealing with logistics. Now, this is something many people don't understand until they've had exposure to it. You know, we deal with the basics of grocery shopping and, dealing with kids and family and that type of thing. But when we're involved in a business, you have so many different aspects to that factor. And when you're dealing with multiple contractors and different individuals, there cannot be just one leader. There has to be the multiple of those leaders. Tell us how, in the Wright Institute, that there are these segments, I'll use that term, the segments within your structure and the facilitators that you work with here. Give us a little bit of insight to that, because you've had some amazing projects.
Yes, and facilitation, which you just said, is exactly what I have grown to love and to use. I think a leader certainly is looked up to. They expect the direction, they expect a strategy from a leader. But I think the best leaders are the facilitative leaders. And what they do is they take advantage of, like you said, the different parts of the organization, the different brains in the organization. I completely agree with Bill, too, that the more diverse that you could bring in to the conversation, the better off you are. we were talking about meetings before. Most of my meetings were stand-up meetings. They don't last an hour. No one can stand that long. Most of my meetings were round table meetings where I was there if I were the leader, but even if there was somebody higher than me, I worked for the vice president and the president, and every time we had a meeting, he wasn't at the head of the table. He was a part of the round table. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, if you want to do that. A lot of the parts of the book that I write about are just kind of ancient wisdom that we have read in our novels, that we have heard about, that have worked. And now we're so sophisticated, we kind of ignore that. But my best meetings were meetings where everybody talked for a short period of time, where the leader, if I was the leader in that case, was the facilitator, making sure that people listen. Because what's the point of a meeting? What's the point of a group if you don't take advantage of the multiple ideas and the functional diversity? When we were building the National Aerospace Plane for President, it was originally started under President Reagan, and it continued under President George H.W. Bush. I had 5,000 people on that team. People from all over the country, later the world, that ran all of the NASA facilities, the Air Force facilities. They all had marvelous ideas, but how do you listen to 5,000 people? This is in the age where computers and Zoom meetings were not available. We had to do things collaboratively, and the setting's important, the posture of the leader, the openness of the leader, the diversity in the group, they're all important parts of leadership. We kind of, I think, believe, and I did when I was younger, that the leader has to do everything. No, what the leader has to do is get the entire organization, if possible, but certainly leaders of those segments of the organizations to collaborate. And from that, I guarantee, and that's why I wrote the book, you will get the innovation and creativity that you need. You could do that to just keep the status quo. There's no question of that. But all my life has been an innovation. We're trying to build an airplane that would fly 25 times the speed of sound for the president. And while we never actually flew it, it was sufficient for the Soviet Union to kind of say, we can't keep up with these people, and they finally capitulated in the 90s. So sometimes you don't even have to do what you set out to do to achieve the objective. So it's all about collaboration and coming up with those new ideas. Leaders aren't put in there to come up with old ideas or keep the status quo. There are some jobs that you don't want the post office to be, constantly being innovative, but for the most part, the leaders that most of us want to be are the ones that will get new ground, take it to a higher level.
I remember a friend, it was a neighbor that worked for Hughes Aircraft, and this was a number of years ago. And Fred was just an average guy, just nondescript. You saw him in a grocery store. There was nothing exceptional about him. And I was astonished to learn that this was a man that made quite a bit of money for Hughes Aircraft, because Hughes Aircraft implemented a program where anybody that worked on the floor of the manufacturing facility, and this was in California, that if they came up with a better idea, they would get a bonus. This guy would come, he was an observer. He saw all kinds of things, and they implemented all kinds of stuff because of him. This is something that people don't seem to get. Innovation is what enables us to improve our lifestyle. After the Second World War, this country, the majority of Americans were not necessarily literate, and they were not in an economic positioning of good sustainability. When you compare what we have today with the people in the early 1900s, there was a poverty level that was unbelievable. And when the Depression hit, it was even worse. And you had areas like West Virginia, and I know because my family drove through the mountains, and a lot of people there, they were in bad situations through so much of the country. After the Second World War, for those that had been in the military, they got the GI Bill. Education was number one. And I know both of you are very big on education. And number two, it was adapting to a different thought process and to a different environment, because now they had opportunities that they didn't have before. So there was an expansion, and there were the dreamers. And one of the biggest comments that I hear from people in so many conversations that I have, they say, America, it's defunct. It's just not there. It's just not doing things. It's just, oh, gee whiz, blah, blah, blah. And then you get media that comes out with their statements, which last for maybe, if you're lucky, 30 seconds. And people will say, gee, what media says, that's God. That's that's God's gospel. Forget about it. What's happening in this country is an amazing shift. And in this country, what is occurring is the brilliant minds in the United States are working very quietly and very, very efficiently. The Wright Institute is one. People like you, Bill, that are training leaders and helping the younger generation, any age, I don't care what your age is, you have an opportunity to be a person that's going to walk the walk and demonstrate what needs to be demonstrated. We are developing manufacturing in this country that is, in my mind's view, very parallel to what happened after World War II. We are having to adapt. We're having to do different things, and that's part of what a leader has to do. Now, it's not going to happen in 30 seconds. I'm sorry. There's no soap opera special here. People think things are going to be resolved in 45 minutes, and they go, excuse me, how come this is taking so long? I mean, look at what's happened with social media, and you have this dimension of thinking that is so unrealistic because experience does not come really, really fast. And it takes time to grow, and we have to invest. We have to take a risk. You brought that up, Bill. Bart, I want you to address the issue of risk, because this is something, when you're doing collaborative innovation, as your institute is very supportive of, so when you're doing that, you have to look at those risk factors and say, what if we fail? Well, what if we fail? Look at how many accomplishments we've had because of failures. Let's chat about that for a minute.
Yeah, another question, kind of reverse a little bit. What if we don't do it? Okay, what are the consequences of not being innovative, of not taking that risk? And it could be something that would, gain economic growth, but it also could be something that would prevent a war or make a war go away or poverty go away. I think you got to flip risk over. And, I don't know this man personally, but if you look at Elon Musk, he asked questions that why not have electric cars? Why not have a space program that is so much cheaper than what we currently have? Certainly a risk involved in that, and you have to manage to that. You have to understand it. I think this country is not taking enough risks. And I don't mean individuals or the government in particular, but I think we have to kind of push forward a little bit. We're getting a little complacent in this country, sitting, watching our TVs and using our phones, and everybody's happy. And that is not what made the United States great. What makes the U.S. so great is we were innovative. We always were. And they took risks. Today, there are so many risk-averse government organizations that actually stop people from trying things. I'll give you an example. Drones, the unmanned air vehicles. Everybody thinks that there's major applications for that. And for example, they're not allowed to fly beyond line of sight. And what that means is like a model airplane. My gosh, let's take a chance and try some with safety precautions that allow us to move forward. So there are a lot of things that are at the cusp of making a huge difference. It's a little bit of risk. I mean, the Wright brothers took a risk. They were in that plane the first time it flew, and now we have airplanes. And so I'm all big for risk. I'm 82, and I've taken a lot of risks. I've flown in the Blackbird. I've done things that most people would say, why did you do it? But I thought, why not? Because if somebody doesn't at least try a little bit, then we're not going to get the kind of America that we want.
I agree. Now, Bill, that is part of what you do with your training for a leader, is not to be risk adverse. Now, we have to use common sense. If somebody says, gee, let's go and, everybody jump off the Golden Gate Bridge on Tuesday afternoon, then, excuse me, let's talk about this before we get into it. But developing and working with people who are risk adverse, that is a challenge, and if a leader encounters that kind of an environment, and you are dealing with a bureaucracy, And there are so many commentaries ad infinitum by people that have dealt with, quote unquote, the bureaucrats who are more concerned about running for an election than dealing with the issues at hand. So they'll turn it over to subordinates, and the subordinates don't have any knowledge of what's going on. All they know is that they have a lunch break, or, gee whiz, I've got a pile of paperwork up to here that I have to take care of by 5 o'clock, and you want me to go and get engaged in conversation about a risk? You're out of your mind. I got to take care of the paperwork. So what do we do with this? When you're a leader, you've got to look at so many different things.
So many things are coursing through my mind right now in response to all of this. Two things I'll mention right off. One of them is that we both have talked about having diverse thought and so forth in the organizations where you're trying to get new ideas and all that sort of thing to solve a problem. When you have a very complicated problem that if you don't solve it, there's some really bad results going to come from it, and you get everybody together, don't expect consensus is a way forward. Because with all these different ideas, different backgrounds and all that, you're going to have different thoughts, different ideas, and people are going to agree or not agree with certain aspects of it, and that's where the leader comes in. At the end, when the decision is going to be made, it's going to be the leader's decision, and they've got to stand ready to take responsibility for that decision and be accountable for that decision that was made with a lack of consensus, even though they had all that input. And that's important. That's part of the risk. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have everybody backing you up on all the decisions you make. You've got to be willing to say, okay, I think this is the right thing to do. Some people will disagree. Maybe they'll disagree vehemently, but I believe this is the right decision, and I'm going to stand by it, and this is what we're going to do. And then you'll do it, and the chips fall where they may after that. So I think that's really important. What would you add another part to that question about what I wanted to add to it too is when you're making a decision involving risk, there are two factors that really enter into it in all humans, and that is you have your rational self, where you apply reason to a problem, and you have your emotional self, where you have all these other emotions, fear, anger, hate, love, all sorts of emotions are running through your mind too. Almost animal instincts about what to do, fighting against that reason. So a good leader learns to use both. You need to listen to your emotions, but you also need to look at the facts and try to find the balance that's right between your emotional self and your reasonable self, and you come up with the best solutions. But again, it's going to be your decision as the leader, and you're going to be responsible for it and accountable for it. But if you believe it's the right thing to do, do it.
Let me just add to that, if
Sure.
I might, that people really crave, I believe, leaders who, like I said earlier, will take them to a place that they feel they are doing something for either the good of the world or something that's a problem. I think people crave to be helped to get to that. We all want to make a difference, right? I mean, we're only got a finite lifetime on Earth here, and yet most of the time, and I'm at the age now where all of my friends are just basking in the sun in Florida, and I'm still working. I've got a group of STEM students all summer long, 8 hours a day for 8 weeks, and we're trying to get them to be collaborative innovators. I'm not saying everybody has to work until they're 82, but I'm saying let's really put our expertise, all the experience that we've had, all these years, the risk-taking we've done, measuring that, let's keep that going. It's not just like, well, let's give it a 30-year try and then the rest of it will flow. Leaders or rather, the organization is a reflection of the leader.
Yes.
If the leader is trying to make a difference, and they show it that way and they're honest, people will follow them, the people that want to make a difference. The rest of them you don't want in your organization anyways. Let them go. They're the bureaucrats that will just keep the organization running. We need that, no question about it. But if you take risk as a leader, people see that very quickly. Now, you can't be wishy-washy. You can't back down. Obviously, if there's something that changes your mind, you follow that. But I do think leaders are more of a feeling manager than they are a systematic organizational manager. You need those. But real leaders, I think, are appealing to the inner needs as well as the inner high goals, altruistic, if you want, of the people that are following them.
Mm-hmm.
I concur, and there's a very significant aspect to that, I feel. There has to be trust, there has to be respect, and there has to be integrity. And I think of a job I had as an executive secretary at one time, and I was working for, it wasn't a big business, it was a middle-sized business. And there were multiple bosses, and they were having a challenge because the industry they were in, there were people that were very unhappy at the company, and they were doing all kinds of different jobs and had very insignificant responsibilities. But the people that were the bosses, especially the owner, the original owner of the business, and the business had been around for 30 years, they weren't really listening. And so there was a union situation that was coming up, a potential of that. And as it turned out, the son of the owner, who had finished college about a year or two earlier, he ended up coming in because his dad no longer wanted to be in the positioning of responsibility. He was going to turn the company over to the son. And I was so impressed with what this young man, who was in his 30s, what he did. He called together all of the employees of the company, had a meeting, and said, I'm here for the purpose of clarifying and understanding what it is that, number one, you're not happy with, and number two, what is it that I can hear from you so that I can understand why it is you feel we need to bring in a union to bring about any kind of reconciliation. Well, the employees were shocked. None of the other bosses had ever talked to them like that. So what occurred is that the employees, he said, I don't want you to say anything to me now. It was a very short meeting, by the way. I don't want you to say anything to me now, but I want you to think about it for a week, and on XYZ day, at such and such a time, at the end of a particular period of work, I want you all to come back in, and I want to hear from you. I don't want to hear from you before then, but I want to hear from you then. Agreed? Everybody was just shocked. They couldn't even respond. They were just stunned. A week later, he gets feedback from them. And he said, all right, give me some time to think about this because I have these responsibilities to do. And he specifically said it, and he said, we're not going to hide anything from you. We have certain challenges in the business. This is what we're dealing with. Give me 2 weeks. They gave him 2 weeks. The union never got in, because things were resolved. Now, they didn't happen all at once. And he told them, he said, I can't do it all at once. As a company, we cannot make fast changes as you might want them to be. But what we can do is that we can prioritize the changes. So there was that transparency and open communication. And I watched him because I thought, this is someone that is of an entrepreneurial kind of a mindset, isn't afraid to look at challenges. And to be able to have that kind of maturity in his 30s, you would think, boy, that is rare. And it is. Usually that kind of maturity doesn't come about unless you've had exposure or you've had a good mentor. So somewhere along the line, his demeanor was, there's no secrets here. This is what you need to know. These are the facts. And I think when it comes to innovative collaboration, that is something that goes all across the board of life. When you are dealing with your family, when you're dealing with friends, when you're dealing in business. These are principles that involve integrity, respect, and trust. And often, even people that may not like you, if they trust you and they trust that transparency, that makes a huge difference. That makes a huge difference. Do you have
Absolutely.
a comment?
Yeah.
Yes. The political issues that are really stalling this country is because no one respects the other guy and no one trusts the other person. So we're at a stalemate and nothing is happening. And that's really problematic in my mind.
Bill, what's your comment on that?
I was going to say, and I'll go out on a limb maybe a little bit here and couch it by first saying I'm not anti-union. They have their place. They really do. But in my mind, in my experience, unions exist in different organizations because of some historical failure of leadership.
Yes.
Leadership failed the workers, and the unions came in to balance the situation out. If that's my take on that.
Well, I agree. And that's where the communication of this particular young executive,
Right.
he made a shift in the demeanor of the leadership of the company. And he was given the open door policy by the other executives because not one of the other executives had that kind of thinking. He was looking at the company, at the business of, this is where we want to go. These are people that are in the working, not unlike the fellow Fred I told you that was making all kinds of money when he worked for Hughes Aircraft because he was coming up with all these ideas. And sometimes it was so simple. It might be a measurement of something. Or, gee whiz, if you're going to do mailings, do it this way. You're going to save so much money. J. Paul Getty, that was something that, you know, made him a billionaire because someone came up, not just because it was about paper clips, but, you know, it's little things like this. But at the fact that the employee is so engaged, they're so engaged that they say, this is a source of pride to me because I'm being valued, and can this be of assistance to the company? I think people like to have that. And Bart, you've addressed that well. We want someone that we can look to as an example. And we can say, I like what that person does. I want to be able to emulate it. And I think anybody, if they're really honest, want to have someone that they can have as that image of, I can be that when I grow up. I mean, I think of kids. So when you have people that don't have integrity, when people lie to you, when they abuse you or make fun of you, and you look at that, and then if you don't feel like you have value, then why are you going to put out too much effort? You're going to work 8 to 5 and say, yeah, that's okay. I mean, I've encountered people like that. And it's like, I've got to make sure I don't say anything, I don't do anything, because, gee whiz, I might lose my job. But sometimes it's when you speak up and you speak out, and you make it clear, you can take it or leave it, but I'm going to give you my 5 cents worth. That's important. And leaders have to understand that this is part of their job, listening.
Yes, absolutely.
Why isn't that taught in business school?
Go ahead, Bill. Yeah. I was going to say that, you know, the model that we followed forever in our country and most capitalistic economic models is you got a customer and you want to give that customer what they want. Same thing with leadership. Your customers are your followers, okay? And you want to give them what they want, what they need. And a lot of times it is direction, it's vision, certainly integrity, excitement, making a difference. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who want to make a lot of money, but down deep, most people want to make a difference in their lives, want to change things for the better, and they're looking for ways to do that. Usually it does take leadership to get them there. So if we looked at our followers as who we're supposed to be satisfying, as opposed to the followers looking up to the leader. The leader, so there was a big trend in the past on servant leadership. I like servant leadership because it says, hey, you're a leader not because you're so cool or you're so smart. You're a leader because people are following you. And that followership, whatever you want to call it, is important to gain, and then you gain the respect of the followers. So it serves everybody well.
Well, gentlemen, I think our time is just about up, and it's just gone by so quickly. I've so enjoyed both of you, Bart Barthelemy and William Merck. You like being called
Mark.
Bill. I want people to know about your books, and we're going to have a good picture of those so people will be able to refer to them, and then your website information will be put in the credits so that people will know how to be in touch with you if they are inclined to do that. And I want to thank both of you for being with me. Before I say goodbye, I would like to just mention that for those of you, and I don't care what your age is, you make a difference who you are right where you are right now. And when you can make a decision about how you want to represent yourself, if you take that leadership position with you, invest in yourself, invest in education, Be a reader. Go to your local library. Support different classes, colleges, universities, any environment that's going to expand your thinking. All of that is so important. Your mind belongs to you. Your creativity is a part of your expression. And you can have a life that is rich, that is interesting, and more than anything else, fulfilling. I do hope that you'll join us again for our next program here on the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. And I invite you to join me weekdays on the daily Donna Sebo Show, which is from 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific Time. Go to my website, delphiinternational.com. You will find the network information is there. And again, I so appreciate your being with me. I hope you've enjoyed my guests. I know I have. Thank you. We'll talk to you again later. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Thank
Glad
you,
to be
Donna.
here.
You have been listening to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. The audio version of this program will also be heard on the Donna Sebo Show radio broadcast. We are delighted you were able to join us and invite you to share this programming with your friends and family. Have a rich and fulfilling life.